Chief Economist at Standard Chartered, Razia joins us now to further this conversation. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Razia. Let me first ask for your reaction to South Africa's GDP contraction by 0.1%. We are looking at a coalition government. Does that have any bearing on the near-term outlook?
So there are a few things that are important here. First of all, on a quarter-on-quarter basis, we had almost expected a negative GDP print. If you look at any of the high-frequency data for which we already had outcomes, 3-month outcomes, mining, manufacturing, retail sales really pointing to the weakness of household demand. We shouldn't be wholly surprised by this. On a sectoral basis, it did paint a very concerning picture. But the most important thing to bear in mind is that GDP is really old news. We had somewhat expected that in year-on-year terms there'd be a better outcome. There was a very weak base. Normally that's enough to give more momentum to the year-on-year measure of GDP. That didn't happen this time. Across the board, every sector except agriculture was weak. But it is old news. We know that over the course of Q2, sure, we had that worrying PMI print for May yesterday, suggesting that momentum stalled considerably in May, but that is just a survey. It's not the hard economic data. The overriding factor may well be the improvement in electricity supply. And almost everyone, the South African Reserve Bank that had made known its economic projections, different market analysts, almost everyone anticipates that the second quarter will see some sort of pickup in GDP with further recovery thereafter.
Now, Razia, how's the global community reacting to South Africa's election results as well as investors?
So South Africa is clearly in very uncharted territory. Ahead of the election, there was a perception that any significant loss for the ruling ANC would be fraught with uncertainty. If it were just a narrow loss of that overall majority, the feeling, the perception amongst investors was, well, that's okay. There'll be enough in the way of smaller parties, independents, to be able to cobble together a coalition. No big change. Pretty much nothing changes. Very few, if anyone, was expecting the kind of outcome that we did see, let alone the ultimate takeaway. If you look at the vote for the ANC, just over 40%, the EFF was down in the 2019 election. But of course, the big surprise was that swing in support for the MK party. It's really the implications of this that markets, investors will need some time to digest. On the one hand, it seems to show some impatience for perhaps faster transformation. Now, there's a big question as to how the different parties will be able to drive that transformation. And right now, the market reaction has been relatively benign, almost up to partially optimistic on the assumption that maybe we could see a DA ANC tie up, either an agreement to work together or some sort of coalition government, and that this would ultimately be considered market friendly. So there are a lot of different things going on for markets right now. At this point, there's still a sense of cautious optimism, and it's only developments over the next few days as we see that countdown to the first sitting of the National Assembly that will determine whether that optimism remains or not.
Finally, Razia, what's to be said then when it comes to possibly quelling the current uncertainty? It is one where we are set for a coalition government. It's the makeup of it, as you correctly explained, that is possibly problematic.
Certainly. And I think if we had what we've seen a little of so far, a strong emphasis on respecting the Constitution, on finding a way to work with different parties that still respects the Constitution, this will still be seen as a market-friendly outcome. Markets are not averse to the idea of even more being done to boost growth. Markets would welcome the greater, deeper adoption of economic reform. The GDP numbers today just underscoring once again why South Africa really needs to do a great deal more to boost economic prospects to achieve anything like economic transformation. Very difficult to do in the absence of actual growth. But the question is, who is going to be trusted to be able to deliver the broader environment that could bring about that improvement in prospects? And this is why the coalition talks are so important. On the one hand, there's the recognition of the obvious fact. In the absence of an overall majority, the ruling ANC will either have to go it alone as a minority government or form a coalition. A minority government might work if it were not fraught with uncertainty any time legislation needed to be passed. This would certainly be new territory for South Africa, where it's been taken for granted in the past that these things can happen with relative ease. So the intent to be more reformist, to do more to accelerate growth, isn't doubted, but the mechanics of how to get there, how to get the governance formulation that will allow it all to happen, that is what is going to be keenly, keenly watched over the coming days.
Thank you so much for your insights. Chief Economist at Standard Chartered, Razia Khan, speaking to us about the latest economic developments in South Africa.